Welcome back, everybody. It is I, Jorio11, and my co-host.
Salem, greetings, Guardians. It's been quite the week.
Indeed, it has. Indeed, it has. Um, Today, we're gonna. Well, actually, let's introduce the podcast. This is the Destiny Lore Emissary Logs, where we discuss the lore, culture, history, science of the Destiny universe. We're obviously Jorio11, and this is my co-host Salem. And
Hello.
today we will be discussing the Osmium Legacy, aka
Ah, yes, more Hive stuff.
the.
Can't wait.
We will be discussing the origins of the Hive, um, from their time on Fundament up until before they entered our Sol system. So to start, um, who are the original members of the Osmium Dynasty, aka the lineage of the Osmium Court? At the top, we have the old Osmium King. Obviously, he is not around for us to even know of his existence outside of these books.
Good.
He was an old mad king, but he did have 3 daughters, and their names were Orash, Sathona, and Zero. Now, when I say zero, I'm not talking about the number zero. I'm talking about the name zero, which is XI space RO. A little bit confusing for some people, but he had 3 daughters, the eldest being Orash, who was very interested in knowledge and history. You have Sathona, who was very interested in becoming a mother figure and living a long life. And finally, you had Zero, who was very much a warrior, somebody who was a bit brash, the youngest of the 3. Now, their life on Fundament was interesting because of what Fundament was. Fundament was the homeworld of the Krill. This planet's history, as of right now, is unknown, but eons and eons and eons ago, there once was a giant gaseous. Is that the correct pronunciation of that word?
I
Gaseous,
believe so.
gaseous, gas giant. It was a gas giant. Um, Its name was Fundament. It had a total of 52 moons, which is certainly interesting in comparison to Earth and its one singular moon.
That is definitely more than enough moons one planet needs.
Um,
If I'm correct, I believe I heard this from Eris Morn. The Krill do not live that long, do they? Well,
so,
at the time.
and that is a good point, and I've actually conferred with Eris on this. So, in the Books of Sorrow, it describes the idea that the Krill of that time only lived for 10 years, which sounds exceedingly short, but you must take into account that Fundament is a very different planet. It's
It's kind of like with how me and my other parents of a species live much longer than normal species, I guess you would say.
humans,
By the
much longer
time we
than
are
humans.
3, we already are pretty knowledgeable. We walk, we talk, we can make coherent sentences. Our lifespan is just much longer than a human's, and it's sad to see that, even when you make friends with one, because they are just a sliver of my lifespan.
A flicker. Now, as I was saying, when it comes to the Hive, the books of Sorrow describe the Krill as only living 10 years, but because of Fundament being such a big planet, because of the lack of information when it pertains to its distance from the sun, how long does it take to make a full rotation? 10 years for the Hive could be 50 years for humanity. It could be 100 years. It could be 1,000 years. We don't necessarily know. what we do know is that the Hive say that their 10-year life is relatively short. Now, once again, that's taken in perspective. Anyways, so Fundament, despite being a gas giant, had an ocean with various little islands scattered throughout, which made up the continents of the planet. Now, a lot of these continents were created when moons, asteroids, other celestial bodies crashed into Fundament, which is certainly an interesting perspective, because that's not how that works here on Earth, obviously, but it's certainly interesting how a continent could, give or take a couple hundred or thousand years before, not have been there because an asteroid or a celestial body or a moon didn't crash into the planet. And it's also confirmed that the Krill are actually not native to Fundament. Fundament is where the species ended up, but it is not where they are from. Which was an interesting.
Really?
It was an interesting discovery made by Orash, which was certainly very interesting to know. Even though Fundament is considered the Krill and, by extension, the Hive's homeworld, it is not technically their homeworld. Another fun little note and quidbit about Fundament was that the Hive, the Krill at this time, were not the only species, and yet again, not the only intelligent species that inhabited that planet. There were plenty of others that are unfortunately unnamed by the Hive and the Books of Sorrow, at least from what I have read. But they do exist. As for the Krill themselves, the Krill while they were one species, they were divided by political factions. The two most important being most important to this story would be the Osmium Court and the Helium Drinkers. Now, at the top of the Osmium Dynasty was the king and his daughters. Besides,
And I thought the Sand Eaters was a little bit of a ridiculous name.
it is certainly
The
funny.
Helium Drinkers, everyone. The Helium Drinkers.
Yes, quite an interesting name.
Let's hear those squeaky voices from how much helium they have consumed.
I can only imagine one of the death songs done with a helium voice that makes it sound like a pre-Golden
It's like
Age
human opera
cartoon.
in real life.
Certainly something that would have sounded like a pre-Golden Age cartoon. That being said, there was an important figure besides the daughters and the Osmium King. There was Teox. Teox was a sterile mother and was chosen to be a political advisor and mother figure, keeper of the sisters.
I can barely assume what motherhood is for them.
Certainly very interesting. Hive patronage and it's complicated, especially given the introduction of sword logic later in their lives. Now, here's the problem. Teox, despite being the political advisor to the king, and despite being a mother figure to the sisters, was not very happy with the Osmium Dynasty as it was at that time. She viewed none of the sisters as reasonable heirs to the clearly maddening king, who was approaching the ripe old age of 10 at that time. So, fearing that one of the sisters would gain power after the old king died and potentially bring the Osmium court to ruin, she reached out to the Helium Drinkers and struck a bargain. She would allow the Helium Drinkers to invade the Osmium court and slaughter the Osmium Dynasty, of the old king and the sisters, and in return, she would act as a regent for the helium drinkers in Osmium Court territory. The deal was struck, and one fateful day, the helium drinkers arrived in the Osmium Court territory and slaughtered the Mad King. Before he was slaughtered, he gave his familiar, an old dead white worm, to Sathona to keep and to guide. Now, before this, there was a prophecy that he told Orush, a great Syzygy. For those who don't know what a Syzygy is, it is when certain celestial bodies, typically moons and planets, align in such a way that it pulls the gravitational force of a bigger, larger celestial body, creating what can be described as a god wave, a mega or a titan tsunami that would absolutely destroy entire continents and a world in of itself. Now, here's the interesting part to note about the Syzygy. Similar technology was used on a moon in our system, Titan, where one of the pyramid ships showed up and used a gravitational pull to pull all of the oceans of Titan into one location before releasing them and sending a giant wave of methane, destroying most of the colonies on Titan.
I wish they killed more.
Of humans?
Oh, no.
Because that's what happened. Titan was the human... oh, you're talking about the krill, right. Apologies. For a second there, I was about to look at you in quite the interesting manner.
My views on humanity have changed over time.
I would hope.
But well, if they didn't, would I be doing this with you?
Exactly. Fair enough. Now, going back, that being said, it is interesting to note that the pyramid had a very similar power as to this Syzygy. It is revealed later that the Syzygy could have been a very likely ploy by a darker, much more ancient individual, or should I say collective of individuals put in one very, very interesting body, to persuade the Hive from becoming something that they would have become at a later date. For one of the moons, the Fundament was not really a moon. But we'll get back to that. After the king died, the sisters, Orush, Sathona, and Zero, fled the Osmium Court. They found a ship, a very old ship. And the ship was simultaneously something that could be submerged, as well as something that could fly, or suspected to fly in outer space. Anyways, going back, the sisters made a pact, and I will read this. I will read this passage directly from the Books of Sorrow. Let me find it. Where is it? I just want to make sure I am getting the correct thing. Okay, here it is. This is the direct This is a direct passage from the Books of Sorrow. It is verse 1-6, also known as Sisters. A register of tokens and gestures exchanged before the end of sisterhood. Zero, my brave sister, you have worked too hard to move the carcasses out of the birthing room. Come, steer the ship for a while. Take joy in what our needle can do. Zero tried to protest, but secretly she was so glad for Orush's care. She flew the needle ship into cutting circles down beneath the sea, and their wake rose up to the surface like a trader's dying breath. Orush, lonely navigator, we have traveled so long with only each other. I know you love to hear and speak new tongues. Please, come sit in the flesh garden room. I will read you the stories I bought at Kaharn. For the record, Kaharn was a naval port on Fundament. Orush sat amongst the mummified flesh fans with two of her eyes closed and listened in silence to Sathona's stories, hungry to understand, voracious to know as much as she could before her 10-year life died. Later, Zebro said, Sathona, cutting mind of ours, you grow lonely in your thought. Play swords and lanterns with me. But Sathona was heavy with sorrow, and she couldn't pretend any joy as she chased Zero through the needle's glistening halls. Sathona, pensive one, what is it? What troubles you? Her sisters listened as Sathona said, Oath-bearing siblings, we are 5 years old. For 2 years we have worked to repair this ancient ship and understand its systems. I am almost too old for the Mother Jelly, and the knights who killed our father are surely dying of age. We 3 will die here, in exile. Teox will outlive us all. And Orush, brilliant-eyed Orush, you will die of old age long before you have proof of your God wave, or any way to stop it. Orush and Zero looked at each other. I wish you weren't so honest, Zero said, and Orush thought that Sathona had never been wrong. In her soul, Orush knew that the only way to keep their oath was to find a great, powerful secret. A secret that could change everything. This was Orush's soul, her fire and her shadow, her desire to cut through the flank of the world and find its beating heart. We have to dive, Orush said. That's what the ship is built to do. Dive into Fundament, the world below us, towards the core. That's where the ancient crew died so obscenely, Zero protested. That's where the atrocity in the birthing room was born. We have to dive, Sathona said, following the whispers of her familiar. In the world beneath us, in the metallic depths, I hope we may find what we need most. More time, more life. So, before this passage, or not too long before, they made a pact where they each cut their hands and put it on the ship, where they promised that one day they would return and destroy Teox and the helium drinkers, reclaim the Osmium Court, and that they would not die as exiles. And yet 2 years passed, and they were still exiles. But due to the whispers of a certain old, white, dead familiar, which was a worm, being puppeted, as we now know, being puppeted by none other than the Witness, they were asked to dive down into the depths of Fundament's ocean. And so they did. They used their ship, their needle ship, to dive down into the ocean, where, before they reached the bottom, they discovered an ancient being known solely as the Leviathan. The Leviathan on Fundament is very different from the Leviathan ship. Very different from the Cabal Leviathan.
Because Cabal Leviathans, they are based on
Land
these
whales.
creatures called land whales. Exactly, land whales on Torobottle. From what I remember, the Emperor practically almost worshipped them every time they would swallow our cities. Because whatever was in their path, it's getting swallowed. You might as well pray to whatever god you believe in that you're out of the way.
This Leviathan was far different and far greater in size. This ancient being was so big, so vast. It was described as the size of a continent. Now, granted, the continents of Fundament were nothing more than glorified islands, but imagine a being so big that it was the size of an island. Massive in size. And yet, the Leviathan was strange. The Leviathan was not violent or predatory. It was a supplicant of sorts. A supplicant of light. This Leviathan, this being under the ocean that was so big that it was the size of continents, went to these sisters in their tiny ship, which paled in size. And it told them, listen, you must turn back. Below me, below us, in the core of the planet, is something you do not want. You must not turn to the deep, but rise above it. You must save yourselves from the deep. You must follow the path of light. But Orosh protested. She said, we have short lives. We will die pretty quickly. There is nothing to go back up to except exile. But the Leviathan said, no, you can't do this. I understand that your lives are short. But it's not good to turn to the deep. You must turn back to the light. You must turn back, for the power of the deep that calls you will likely devour you. And then Zero protested, and she said, you're old. You're big and old. If the world is supposed to be us just going up and living in exile and not being, and just hoping for change, then we're just gonna let Teox win. And I can't have that. I'm a warrior. And then the Leviathan said, you can't. The sky builds on life. It's about life and hope. Whereas the deep is nothing more than death and hunger and destruction and devastation. You have the sky, the way of the sky, the way of the light is harder, but it is kinder. And then Sathona protested. She said, hey sisters, I have my father's familiar. This big old Leviathan is saying, go back up. You gotta just live with the cards that you're dealt with. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying that not verbatim, but paraphrasing, obviously. And she's saying,
Because
hey,
does not know when to keep her mouth shut.
Hey, this worm is telling me the answers. It's telling me that we can get revenge and that we can make our own fate, as it were. Whereas this big old Leviathan is telling us we should just go back up and accept our fate. So who are you going to trust? The Leviathan who wants us to live and suffer? Who will not save us from Teox or your Zissagi Godwave? Or the plain, honest, And from there, they dive. They dive to the core of the planet. And at the core of the planet, Orush steps out of the ship, which normally, considering you're at the bottom of the ocean, you'd be crushed by the pressure. And yet Orush is fine, because she's in the presence of gods. Or pretender gods. I will read this passage straight from the Books of Sorrow. And it goes like this. Verse 1-9. The bargain. You are Orush, heir to the Osmium throne. You stand on the naked hull of an ancient ship. You stand exposed to the crushing pressure and ferocious heat of the deeper fundament. It should annihilate you. It is by my will alone that you survive. I am Yul, the honest worm. Behold my passage. Behold my vast displacement, my ponderous strength, my great and coiling length, my folded jaws and curled wings. Behold the hiving cities, symbiotic with my flesh. I am fecund, Orush. I am at the beginning and the end of lives. Behold Ire, and Zol, and and Akka. We are the virtuous worms. Look upon us and know that we are God. For millions of years, we have been trapped in the deep. From across the stars, we have called life to fundament so that it might contend against extinction. For millennia, we have waited. We have awaited you, our beloved hosts. Against you stand the cruel Leviathan and all the forces of the sky. They would crush you down into the dark. They have arranged for moons to drown you in fear of your potential. We want to help you, princess. We offer each of you a bargain. Symbiosis. Take into your bodies our children, our newborn larvae. From them you shall obtain eternal life. From them you shall gain power over your own fragile flesh. The power to make of it as you will. And should you find an imperfection in the world, an injustice, or an inconvenience, you will have the power to repair it. Let no mere law bind you. We ask one thing in exchange, O princess. You must obey your nature forever. In your immortality, Orush, you may never cease to explore or inquire for the sake of your children. In your immortality, Zero, you may never cease to test your strength. In your immortality, Sathona, you may never abandon cunning. If you do, your worm will consume you. And as your power grows, O princess, so will your worm's appetite. But we offer eternity, Orush. We offer you a chance at the universe. Would you deny your people infinity? Reach up to me and let my flesh be your sacrament. It was at this moment that the sisters became the beings who they were destined to become. Zero ingested the Night Mower. And became Xivu Arath, the Hive god of war. Sathona ingested the Mother Morph and became Savathun, the Witch Queen, god of cunning. And Orush took in the King Morph. Orush went from a female to a male and became Aurix, or Oryx, depending on your translation. They became eternal beings that would change the fate of the universe as a whole. After becoming the gods, they rose back up from the bottom of their planet, back to the surface. And when they got back to the Osmium court, their first act was to slaughter the helium drinkers, annihilate their entire clan. Then they turned to the rest of the Hive after Teox had fled, because obviously she fled.
Like a coward.
They turned to the rest of the Hive and said, "You will ingest these worms that these worm gods have gifted us. You will ingest them. If you do not, you will be annihilated. You either become us, or you flee. Or die." And many of the Hive, or the Krill, decided to take up this new calling, this new existence, by ingesting the worms. And over time, this Krill, this now Hive, tore through Fundament and killed everything. Every species, every faction of the other Krill, it all just kept going and going and going until their entire world was nothing more than destruction and Hive. Now, at this time...
And I wish the downfall on all of them.
Oh, trust me, I have my own personal vendettas with the members of that family. Anyways,
So do
the
I.
next major event to happen in the Hive's history is the Ammonite. Now, after Fundament was completely ravaged and taken over, as it were, a species found on the 52 moons of Fundament, known as the Ammonite, had granted Teox asylum amongst their ranks. This obviously angered the sisters, the siblings. They're not sisters anymore. The siblings. This obviously enraged the siblings. So, they wanted to fight war with the Ammonite. But before they even decided to fight war, they discovered that there was not 52 moons, but 53. This 53rd moon was something called the Traveler. Yes, that Traveler. That Traveler had gifted the Ammonite with the light. Not in the same way that it did the Guardians, but in ways that would advance their species above normal capacity.
Sometimes I duly true wonder, why did the Traveler never come to us? This being of whatever, a being of light? What? It goes to all these different species, hoping it'll have refuge there, but yet never thinks about what can be heavy hitters for it.
My only answer to that is perhaps the fact that if the Traveler had showed up in your system, especially if certain leaders were in charge, it probably would not have gone over well for the Traveler. Considering your species is willing to destroy stars on a on a whim. I don't think the Traveler would have deemed them as quite the suitable species to inhabit. Now,
If
who
it sees
knows?
us destroying stars, then why doesn't it take on and grab that opportunity to give us the light? We could break down the foes. We can control the darkness. We will defeat it.
But here's the thing. When it comes to the Traveler, none of the species that the Traveler visited were ever warlike. Or at least overtly warlike, which is saying something as somebody who derives themselves from humanity, which is known for their wars. But at the time that the Traveler showed up in our system, wars had been practically non-existent. Humanity had finally learned to just coexist peacefully.
But yet the Traveler takes part in them practically by giving Guardians light, and they fight their own wars and their own battles. Pretty hypocritical, if I do say so myself.
Whether or not the Cabal will ever get their redemption in the eyes of the Traveler is to be seen. Now, moving on back to their story. According to the Books of Sorrow, the Ammonite were a species that inhabited the 52 moons. Their homeworld was one of the moons, which is unnamed at this time, but it was a ice moon. So these bony six-armed cephalopods that made up the Ammonite inhabited a large ice moon. Now, they inhabited technically all of the moons, but that was their, and I say this in quotations, home planet. But it's a moon. Interesting. Anyways, at this time, the Hive did not have a ability to escape. Until, that is, the worm gods allowed the Hive to escape the orbit of their planet with the use of portals, tears, in the Ascendant realm, as it were. So, after this, they slowly developed technology and ways to fight space battles, as it were. And at this time, Chroma Admiral... How do I say this name? Rafreet? Chroma Admiral Rafreet, who was the Ammonite general in charge of their fleet, obviously, was able to fight against the Hive pretty significantly. At the time, there was a bit of a stalemate, as it were. But it wouldn't last long. Oryx would attempt to make peace with the Ammonite after a decent bit of time, and was planning to meet a council of the Ammonite on one of their moons. Now, this action enraged the worm gods. This was not what the Hive should have been doing. They were not beings of treaties or logic or this peaceful logic, that is. They were not beings of peace or comfort or relegation or what's the word? Armistice. These were warriors. And because of Oryx's transgression, Savathun killed him. That's right. Savathun killed Oryx. Now, you'd probably be wondering, well, if Oryx is dead, then how does the story continue? And that is where the secret came in. The Ascendant Realm. After Oryx was killed, he appeared in his Ascendant Realm. And was confronted by the worms. And they said to him, listen, your species needs to kill. Okay? You need to keep doing what we promised you and what you said you would do when we gifted you that king worm. Okay? There is no, oh, let's make a treaty. No. Okay? There is none of that. Now, if you die, you'll come back to this ascendant plane. And actions can be done to return you from your ascendant plane. So, when you are in the material plane, not this ascendant plane, but when you're in the material plane, you can die and come back. Now, if you are killed in your throne in this ascendant plane, you will be forever dead. This is a gift that we have given to you. Now, when you return to the material universe, you will use this lesson of having to fulfill your purpose, this logic, as it were, this logic of swords, to just keep going and enact your plan. Okay? And so, eventually, Oryx does come back after he is killed. At this time, the wars keep going. After Savathun had killed young Alrix, she then poisoned the Ammonite Satellite Congress, which was the meeting that they were holding, and the entire moon was rotted to the core with Hive poison. When they came back, the Leviathan, who had been long hiding within Fundament, came out of the ocean and into space. Now, was this a good idea? No. Absolutely not.
You launch yourself from the ocean into space.
That's how it's written in the book, unfortunately. I don't know how it works,
What?
but...
Does the Leviathan go at the very bottom of the ocean and then hit a... Oh, yes, I can fly now.
My guess, it's similar to how some creatures can shoot themselves out of the water, but because this is one the size of a continent...
This is a Leviathan!
When it's the one of the size of a continent, when it jumps out of the water, it doesn't jump out of the water, it jumps out of the planet. At least that is my interpretation. Anyways...
Broke the sound barrier in the process.
This Leviathan, this priest of the light, this worshipper of the light and the traveler and everything, when he left the orbit, when he was in the orbit of Fundament, the Chroma Admiral had to protect it because it was a fellow worshiper of light. It was sacred. It was a holy old priest. Now, this was an issue because before the Chroma Admiral was able to successfully fight off the Hive and their ships because he didn't have to worry about defending anything. He was able to dance circles around Xivu Arath and the ships and Sathona and the Hive as a whole. But now he couldn't do that. He had to protect the Leviathan. And here we're going to read the next another passage from the Books of Sorrow. Verse 2:8, Leviathan rises. The Leviathan has broken cover. The old priest is in the open space, moving towards the Ammonite home moon. Chroma Admiral Rafrit and his elite guard move with it. Rafrit is a hero of his generation, an Ammonite of peerless battlecraft. He danced circles around Xivu Arath, but now he has to protect his holy Leviathan. We'll give the old lunk a word. This is what the old Leviathan said. Ruin, grief and ruin. The Krill lost, the Ammonite ravaged, our travelers' work undone. Sisters of Orosh, open your eyes. Who has made you monsters? Who summoned the wave? Make peace. Join with me in golden renewal. In counter-argument, Alrex, we ask you this. What has the Leviathan done for your people? Who gave you immortality and let you out of your prison? Who answered your questions about the universe with truth instead of sermons? Find Deontay. I don't know what that word is. Find Deontay. This is interesting. Find Deontay with Savathun. Crush the chrome...
Deontay.
I don't know what that word means, but whatever. Crush the Chroma Admiral, boil the Ammonite seas, and slaughter the Leviathan with witchcraft. Once the way is open, we will show you how to eat the Traveler.
Eat a traveler.
Eat it of its light. Now,
Curiosity is now hitting me. What does light taste like?
good question. Anyways, this battle ended in the defeat of the Ammonite. The Leviathan was murdered. It is described in the next verse, and I won't read this verbatim, but the Leviathan died, and the worms fed on its corpse. The worm gods, I should say. Zebu Arath made a temple of the Chroma Admiral's impaled corpse. Savathun poisoned the Ammonite's homeworld, making it uninhabitable. And the Traveler fled. It is at this point I can state without falter or questioning. At this point, the Ammonite were made extinct. This was the first casualty of the Hive, but it was certainly not the last. After this, the worm gods and the siblings left Fundament and their home system, and they traveled throughout the galaxy, hunting down and destroying every civilization that they could possibly get their hands on. And many, many fell, including such species. We'll go over one of the major species before we get to the other big note. One species that the Hive were able to destroy was the Kugu. The Kugu were bipedal creatures that descended from herd-like animals. Very interesting. Their description is very interesting. Anyways, the Kugu were interesting beings that were tied not only to light, but darkness. In fact, the pyramid
Were
ship...
they sentient creatures, or were they like herd animals?
No, they were sentient. They had militaries. Now, a pyramid ship actually visited the Kugu before the Hive showed up. But eventually the Hive did show up, and destroyed the Kugu. The Hive used interesting tactics, including tricking them into going into an Ascendant realm, tricking them into using the pyramid ship's resonant blast, which in fact destroyed the pyramid of the Kugu, and the pyramid's destruction released resonance that would have eventually claimed the Kugu. But it was ultimately the Hive that led the Kugu to their destruction. There are plenty of other Kugu that are mentioned, but an interesting one that comes to note was Hey Qual is the name. The Warden of the Set Armada, whose was so... The mind and memory of this Warden was preserved by the Witness because of its interesting nature, and these memories and mind would later be converted into the Echo of Command. For those who don't know, the Echo of Command is the one that the Echo of Command is the Echo that is currently in possession of a very particular Earth woman who now controls a sect of the Vex. You're obviously speaking of Maya Sundarush, aka the Conductor. The Echo that she possesses is the Echo of the Quugu, a race destroyed by the Hive. Now, during their off time, because obviously the Hive do have off time between killing other species, the Hive would end up fighting each other to consistently feed their own worms, because without battle and without pursuing their own worms, their worms would eventually eat them alive. They have to continuously feed them and continuously do what their natures tell them to do. With Savathun, she has to continuously be cunning. With Zevo Wrath, she has to continuously fight wars and be a warrior. With Oryx, Aurix, he consistently had to find ways to be knowledgeable and find knowledge. So they would often fight each other in downtime, which is certainly an interesting pastime for a bunch of Hive to do, but seems on brand. Imagine two Hive get really bored and they just decide to just start fighting each other. That's about how it goes.
To be fair, I know this is a lot coming from me, but it isn't too far off from what we do in the Colosseums and the fighting pits of what we do. But it's more of a rite of proving than just being plain out bored.
It is certainly interesting. But yeah, I would see Cabal doing a similar thing. But unlike the Cabal, who would fight each other but may not kill each other, the Hive's whole shtick is that they have to.
Oh, we do. We do kill each other. We do.
For fun?
It's either you prove yourself to live or you die.
Fair enough, I guess. Maybe that's something
That's how
similar.
we deal with runts most of the time. Like how Gaul was a runt. And he already proved himself for a long time. But yes, fighting pits are for killing. There is really... We have training sessions, obviously, where it's not killing each other, but there's no promise of no bloodshed.
Right. Anyways, getting back to our story, as these siblings fought each other and killed other races, their worms' hunger exponentially grew and grew and grew, which became a bit of a problem. They were getting a little bit concerned. What happens if the worms get so hungry that they decide to eat them? Because that's what hive worms eventually do. If their host is not able to sustain the worm eats the host. Now, a threat would arise for the Hive. A threat that would deem them to be probably their biggest challenge outside of humanity, I would go to say. And this species that would give them so many problems and even change them fundamentally would be the Ecumene. This species, or collective of species, from what some things are reading as, was able to predict the Hive before they even showed up. It is described that they were able to... They found a ship with somebody inside said ship. An organism frozen in stasis within the hull. This being was Teox, The old, old mother.
When will this thing die?
She was able to brief the Ecumene on the Ammonite civilization's fall and the rise of the Hive. And because of this, the Ecumene were accurately able to prepare themselves before the Hive even showed up in their system. And because of this, when the Hive did show up in their system, it was a hard fight. They battled for years and years and years, and it was a stalemate. And unfortunately, at some point, the three siblings convened. And they said, hey, our worms are about to feast on us. We can't beat these people. We can't beat the Ecumene. I am running low. I am dying. We are all dying because we cannot feed our worms because these Ecumene are too tough. So, the sisters, Zivorath and Savathun, who were all in a tizzy, were confronted by Aurix, who said, you know, what are you guys talking about? We have to beat them. We have to find a way around this, okay? We have to come up with something. But they didn't know a way. The sisters didn't know. But then Oryx said, I know a way. I know a way to beat the Ecumene. And so, he slaughtered both of his siblings. Took their power. Now, it is to be noted that they were in Oryx's throne world when this happened, which could explain why they weren't, like, dead despite being in an ascended plane. Anyways, after this happened and after he killed them, he absorbed their power, for that is sword logic. So, after killing them, he went to his worm god. One of the worm gods, Akka. And he said, hold up, I must respond to something very quickly. My bad.
Oh, don't worry, take your time. It's not like we're running on a tight schedule or anything.
Exactly. So, he approached, and I will read this verse, because this is a very important verse. Verse 3:8 from the Books of Sorrow. In the cold abyss...
Sounds like you're reading from a Bible.
Well, according to the Hive, this is their Bible.
Oh, yes.
In the cold abyss of a sword world, King Orosh walked under a cloak of green fire. He walked through the sky, and the sky shuddered and froze beneath his feet. He walked until he found Akka, the Worm of Secrets, who was denying a truth until it became a lie. Akka, my god, Worm of Secrets, I am Aurix, sole king of the Hive. I have come to receive a secret. I want the secret power of the deep which you hold. I give no secrets, said Akka, whose word was code. No, said Aurix, you give nothing. Giving is for the sky. You worship the deep, which asks that we take what we need. Akka said nothing, because if it denied this truth, the truth might become false. But you gave us your larvae, the worm, said Aurix. And that is why the worm devours us now, because it was given, not taken. So I must take what I need from you, although you are my god. Said Akka, you have not the strength. But this was a lie. Alrix had killed Savathun, his sibling, and Zivorath, his sibling, and he had the sword logic of killing them. Aurix, the first navigator, set upon his god with his sword and his words, and cut Akka to pieces, and took from those pieces the secret of calling upon the deep. He wrote the secret on a set of tablets, which he called the Tablets of Ruin, and he wore them about his waist. And then Auric said, now I may speak to the deep, the beautiful final shape. I will be the king of shapes, and I will learn the secrets of our destiny. His speech into the deep is not recorded here, but it is known that he returned, and he said, now I am Oryx, the Taken King, and I have the power to take life and make it my own. And he went out into the universe and fought the Ecumene with his tablets, and the worm, his god, was pleased. It is at this moment that Oryx, the Taken King, rose. During the war with the Ecumene, which, by the way, lasted hundreds of years, he was able to summon back his siblings. He summoned back Zivorath by making war with the Ecumene for 100 years. And then, when his sister came back, he trapped the sect of the Ecumene and said, hey, listen, I don't like my sister. You guys want to help me out? And the Ecumene sub-faction was like, yeah, sure, let's go do that. And he laid a trap for them, got them trapped, and killed them. This act of cunning was able to bring Savathun back. So all the siblings were back, and now Oryx had this amazing new ability called Taking, where he would subjugate a being, put them in this realm of darkness, pure darkness, and what would come back out was a being was a Taken, a being that had the soul, the mind ripped from the body, and the body remained in this black fire appearance, and this body was controlled by whoever was controlling the Taken. In this case, Oryx. There are other beings who can control Taken, obviously, and we'll get to that in a later episode. But at this time, Oryx was one of the first to take. And he was able to use this ability, and his siblings, who would now come back to finally destroy the Ecumene. It was at this point that the Ecumene was wiped off. Another species completely made extinct. And it's exceedingly tragic from somebody who is fascinated with the lore and the science and the culture and the history of species outside of my own. I will never be able to research more history for any of these species, whether it be the Ammonite or the Kugu or the Ecumene, because they were all annihilated by this triumvirate of death gods.
To be fair, that's how I sometimes feel with some of the species that we've made extinct. Sure, we've kept many records of them, but at the same time, I've never personally met them, and I wonder, were they truly that useless that we had to make them go extinct? Or were we just that heartless back then? I can't really have any room to talk on what the Cabal do, because I take part in it. But it's a question I have sometimes when I'm in deep thought.
Making species extinct is never a good thing for historians, because it denies us a lot of information that could have been useful or interesting, and it's one of the reasons why I despise the Hive as a whole, outside of my own personal vendettas. I hate the fact that they have destroyed
A lot of personal vendettas.
countless
Many.
species are now completely defunct and extinct, and only are told about, and their only existence is found in the book of the species that annihilated them from existence. And that's sad. And by the way, the Quugu and the Ammonite and the Ecumene are but 3 of many species that were eliminated by the Hive. I could talk about the campaigns that the Hive made before they even reached Earth, and I will. It is written down that they went to Reese, and they were there on Reese as it fell during the Whirlwind event. I know that the Hive had encountered the Cabal far before they ever came to Earth. So it's not. They're consistently responsible for the downfall or ruination of entire species, if not the complete annihilation. And we will discuss 2 more species that they eliminated. More specifically, the Tai-Shebeth and the Harmony. Now, the Tai-Shebeth was a beautiful empire that was comprised of beings that were avian. They were intelligent, they had their own system, they had their own empire, and they had a being called the Emperor Raven, who was this giant, massive being. And we will discuss what happened to the Tai-Shebeth in verse 4.0, also known as a golden amputation. Wrath. Behold the wrath of Oryx, coiled for 10,000 years. Behold the golden amputation, the fall of Tai-Shebeth, the end of an age. We beat the worlds of Tai-Shebeth like skull drums, and we howl in joy for our black war moons as they ram silver orbitals and gleaming star webs, where infant Tai-Shebeth sun ravens curl and die unborn. In his throne world, Oryx paces 10 times. He takes 10 footsteps, in other words. On the first pace, Kreghor sends the accursed to blight the Tai-Shebeth worlds. On his second pace, the Tai unleash their battle plates and arsenal ships to fight our moons. On the third pace, Oryx's war priest meets them in battle, and he is victorious. He paints the void with fire and salts the earth with ash. On the fourth pace, Mengor and Cragdug, Dyad Knights, go to the Raven Bridge, and they stand on it and kill the Tai for 10 years. On the fifth pace, the Tai Emperor Raven comes home to her bridge, and she cuts a moon with her talons, and she cuts open and kills its brood. Just to give you an idea of how powerful the Emperor Raven is. She was able to destroy an entire Hive war moon in one swipe. On the sixth pace, Oryx speaks, saying, "Listen to me, Emperor Raven, for I will describe to you the last true shape, which is written on my tablet." And he puts out his fist full of black fire and swallows up the Emperor Raven with a wound. Ayat. Only Oryx knows this power, the power to take. On the seventh pace, the perfect Raven comes out of Oryx's wound, and she spreads her wings across Tai-Shebeth. Never again is a Tai-Shebethi child born. She is perfect, and she enacts the will of Oryx. In other words, Oryx took the Emperor Raven, and this Emperor Raven was able to, maybe more so metaphorically, but spread her wings across Tai-Shebeth. I don't know if it was physically, but it could be metaphoric. But because of this, no more Tai Shabeth were born. No more Tai Shabethi were born, which is crazy. On the 8th pace, the Tai say, listen, you are spoilers, you are sphincters, and excreta, you rot. Why do you kill? We make silver orbitals and golden star webs. We hatched eggs. We had a good thing. Our clothes were nice. Our food was famous. With one of her feathers, our emperor could have tickled the gods. On the 9th pace, Oryx says, this is the only God. This ability to dictate what will and what will not exist. This power to go on existing. This is your God. It is never ticklish. And on the 10th pace, the Tai Shabeth are extinct. Then Oryx says, listen, my siblings, do you know what we have done? We have conquered our way to the edge of the deep. It whispers to me, and I call when I call on it, and it guides my flight. It says that we are at its threshold, and that I should come inside. I will go speak to it. So, yet another species completely eliminated. A beautiful species, to say the least. I would have loved to meet this Emperor Raven. Now, the last species we'll just go over before some quick notes about Oryx and a bit of his history after the destruction of this next species and the Tai Shabeth. Anyways, we'll discuss that in a bit. One last species, one that actually has importance to the Cabal, I should say. This species is known as the Harmony. Now, the Harmony are an interesting world. So, when the Harmony were visited by the Traveler. The Harmony included 10 planets, including their homeworld, which was Anaharmony. And their planet system was around a black hole. Normally, black holes would suck up all the planets, obviously. Now, when the Traveler visited their system, it built them the Gift Mast, which was a construct that came out of the black hole's polar jets, the poles. So imagine a black hole with two beams of pure light poking out the top and the bottom. Beautiful. It was this beautiful construct. And their ships, the Harmonious Flotilla, Invincible, guarded the core worlds, and the Nika Thought ship, a ship of unknown purpose, was also there. Now, the Harmony had a special relationship with another species, a species of particular interest. These were wish dragons, known as the Ahamkara. They were able to grant wishes. Now, an Ahamkara bone, originating from the Harmony, would eventually make its way into the possession of one Emperor Callus. The bone that he clutched for the majority of his empire came from this species. This species, the Harmony, and their relationship with the Ahamkara. Which is, I find that so fascinating. Don't you, Salem?
I do.
It is so...
For anyone who hasn't seen our second episode, the Ahamkara bone was Emperor Callus's trump card, basically. That's what it was. It was his trump card. If anything went wrong, he would use it. But that backfired.
Now, at the time that Oryx came to the Harmony's place, two things had happened. Number one, he had children. The reason he had children was to... How do I explain it from Oryx's perspective? Have somebody to love and kill. Hive, and I'll go into a little bit of Hive culture when it comes to that. When
Why have
Hive,
a child just to kill it?
So when Hive love each other, they kill each other, because the act of killing makes you stronger. So when you're killing each other, you're making each other stronger, which is the Hive's way of loving each other, which from a human and even a Cabal perspective, that's certainly very weird and a bit backwards, but
Very.
it's how they show love. They kill each other. Now, he would obviously have his children, and each of them will get their own episodes. Now, the other thing that he did was create his flagship, the Dreadnought. The Dreadnought is made from the chitin and body, a bit of it, of, excuse me, Dear Akka. The other thing that Oryx did with the Dreadnought is that he inverted his throne world onto the Dreadnought. This inversion would be deemed by the Hive as a holiday called Inversion Day, where the Hive would in turn turn things inside out. Which I find exceedingly funny.
I find it extremely gross.
It's funny that the Hive have a holiday, and that holiday involves turning things inside out. Anyways, by the time he got there, he had his children, and he had his Dreadnought. So, when they got there, the Hive did, in fact, destroy the Harmony. They fought them for nearly a century, a little bit over. Now, and I can go over the how they destroyed them, because, I mean, that is quite interesting how they were able to destroy them. Basically, the Hive used the black hole at the heart of their empire to backfire on them. And the Hive ate from the accretion poles. The poles of light, they ate from it. The Traveler obviously escaped. So when after it gifted them, and yeah, I mean, after that, the Hive pretty much went their own separate ways. There's obviously there was still some infighting and some other things happened, including Cordia, what happened with the children. But after a while, the siblings went their own way because they viewed Oryx as a bit stifling. He was a little bit more powerful than the other siblings because obviously he had the power to take. So they were a little bit stifled by Oryx, so they both left. After they left, Oryx decided, listen, I need to write down a history of myself. I need to write this down. Well, technically not right. Anyways, he created these calcified fragments. Memories calcified into solid form. And it is these calcified fragments that make up the Books of Sorrow. That is what we get most of our things from. We as Guardians got a lot of our information from the Hive via their personal libraries, but in particular the Books of Sorrow were really discovered and unearthed by us during the Young Wolves incursion onto the Dreadnought. A lot of Guardians were able to find calcified fragments, which were then decrypted and translated into the books. And it is this that allows us to peer into the past of the Hive themselves. Now, other species create certain ways of describing their past in more historical culture and historical relevance, like the Cabal, for example. Whereas the Hive write their history, or more specifically, Oryx wrote his history, as more of like a Bible, as was pointed out earlier. Which goes to show how the Hive view beings like Oryx and Savathun, and Sivu, and the Worm Gods. They are actual gods, and they are to be worshipped. And it's just so fascinating that it was written in this way. Now, there was a note in the Books of Sorrow by
wish they died.
Savathun herself, where she said, "This book is full of lies." Now, from a historical standpoint, a lot of this information is biased. This comes from the perspective of Oryx, so these events are biased. Granted, a lot of historical texts we get from the universe now are biased in some sort of way, shape, or form. But we do with what we can from the knowledge and try to glean what is personal opinion versus what definitely happened. Now, what happened to the members of the Osmium Dynasty and the major 5 players, or the major players of this story? Let's start with the Worm Gods. As it pertains, two of the 5 Worm Gods are dead. Akka is very much dead, because Akka was destroyed in order for Oryx to become Oryx, the Taken King. The other dead Worm God would be Zol, the Will of Thousands, who was destroyed during the events of... during the event where Rasputin reawakened on the Hellas Basin in Mars. The young wolf can attest to the Worm God's death. Interestingly enough, that Worm God, Zol, the Will of Thousands, inhabits a exotic weapon that a couple of Guardians now wield, known as the Whisper of the Worm. So, interesting how sword logic still pertains in that sense. The 3 remaining Worm Gods who are still alive are Ire, the Keeper of Order, the Everhunger, and Yol, the Honest Worm. Yol being the head honcho of the bunch. They are still very much alive. The Traveler is where it is. The Leviathan, very much dead. It's been dead for quite some time. Now, as for the siblings, what is the fate of the siblings as of today? As of the time of recording? Oryx is long dead. He has been dead since the Guardians killed him not only once, but twice. Once...
Hopefully he stays dead.
I would hope so. His body, after dying his permanent death, launched itself towards Jupiter, ended up on Titan, underneath the ocean, where Savathun and her Lucent Brood attempted to resurrect him. Now, the body of Oryx has been procured by the Vanguard, and it currently sits in a warehouse somewhere in the city. I have personally been to said warehouse and was able to...
How big of a warehouse do you need to put that in? How big?
Well, here's the thing.
The last city had?
So, here's the thing, right? Me and other fellow scientists and researchers found that the body of Oryx is still perpetually growing. Latent taken energy is causing it to keep growing and growing and growing. It is currently in a warehouse. I will not disclose the location of said warehouse, but rest assured that warehouse is heavily secured. Only certain individuals are allowed in because obviously the idea of a lucent brood or lucent hive adjacent ghost getting inside of there would be deemed as a national not only national, a world-ending catastrophe. So the warehouse is kept secret and safe, so do not worry about that too much.
Well, it's not my planet, so I don't really care that much.
Well, imagine if Oryx had possession of the light. Now that would be quite a misstep. Anyways, Oryx is dead. A lot of people like to think that the echo of navigation that was encountered less than a year ago was Oryx resurrected, but the echo is nothing more than a sentient recording. It's an echo taken from Oryx himself just as he became Oryx, not the Oryx that we fought. The Oryx that we fought and killed. And the echo of navigation, or the echo of Oryx that inhabits the echo of navigation, are very different. Their opinions are different. Their knowledge is different. even their personalities are distinctly different. I was able to have a conversation with that one myself. I will not disclose the information of that conversation. It is personal, but rest assured they are not the same being. And to compare the navigation as Oryx coming back would be a misunderstanding of what the Echo of Navigation actually is. Now, as for the next member of the Osmium Dynasty, Xivu Arath, the youngest of the siblings. During the events in which Eris Morn herself became a Hive god, she was able to strip Xivu Arath of her throne world, making her essentially mortal, which in turn kind of broke Xivu Arath and made her follow beings like the Witness, which, by the way, was not who they were intentionally following. According to the Echo of Navigation, who was a younger Oryx, they were following the Deep, not the Witness. Which is weird, considering the Witness's own personal history with the manipulation of the Krill becoming the Hive, but it is what it is. So, Xivu Arath is currently mortal, currently on the run, as it were, and she's scared. She's scared of death, which is certainly heretical for the Hive, who fear no death. And that brings us to the last member, Savathun, the Witch Queen. Now a supplicant of the light, a guardian in her own right, or light bearer at a minimum. She is certainly a threat that is still out there. I think of between her and Xivu Arath, I think she is the bigger target, for the sole fact that she is in fact herself a light bearer. And during the events of Heresy, she made it very clear that her relationship with humanity that was somewhat peaceful during the fall of the Witness had come to an end, and that our meddling with her personal affairs was deemed as quite the backstab, even for the Queen of Backstabbing. So she is certainly out there.
Lucky enough that the Empress didn't crush her ghost on the battlefield of the Witness.
Oh, trust me, I would have crushed that ghost quite some time ago. Let's just say when Savathun's ghost was in the possession of the Vanguard, I was not allowed in the same room as said ghost.
Let's just say I'd accidentally use an entire magazine of a heir apparent on Savathun. Accidentally.
My personal vendetta with Savathun is almost as personal as my vendetta with Oryx. But that's for another time.
Savathun and Xivu Arath had both a part in the fall of Thorobottle, and a part of my own personal... Well, I don't know the word for it, but it's my basically own personal reasons. So I hope they all burn in their own soul fire.
Yes, we all have personal vendettas with that tricky Osmium Dynasty. Now, before I go on, I should mention one more character whose fate is actually unknown. Teox. Now, Hive obviously have their 10-year lifespan, and yet Teox was able to avoid death by time and time again avoiding the Hive through stasis fields and going into cryosleep and whatever, what have you. There is the potential for Teox to still be out there. And if she is, I would personally like to have a meeting. While I don't necessarily agree with Teox from a personal perspective, doing her being a traitor and all, I would like to get some insight from her. Now, the other thing to note about Teox that is exceedingly interesting is that according to in Cabal culture, they have this, the Scions have this machine called the Oxa machine, which translated
Oxa or
or
Oxta.
Oxta machine is another abbreviation for the machine's name. And if you rearrange the letters of Oxta, it does in fact make Teox. So, is there a connection between the Oxa machine of the Scions and Teox, the mother figure of the Osmium Dynasty? It is certainly a note that cannot be unseen or not mentioned, but any conclusive data is not here. So, whether or not there's a connection, we don't know. Personally, I think there might be some type of connection between the two, but who knows? We don't have access to either Teox or the Oxta machine. Maybe in time we'll be able to discern new information. Are there any other notes or things that you would like to say before I say a couple notes and things of my own?
Well, I guess the only thing really noteworthy when it comes to Hive and Cabal is that most of our legends, and I will admit, many Cabal were named after Hive, like Amuna Wrath. Obviously, her parents knew about the legend of Xivu Arath and decided to name the Primus of all legions that we know and used to adore Amuna Wrath. As the star Keitel was named after a Hive saying, the Empress herself was named after a Hive saying.
Ayat, which we will go over the importance of Ayat in a further episode when we also discuss sword logic, because the two are intertwined in a broad sense. But yes, it is interesting how many Cabal actually have some of their name what is the word?
Driven.
Deriven? No, there's a specific word that eludes me right now. They derive from, a lot of Cabal names derive from Hive words or sayings or entities, which goes to show the Hive's total influence over various different species. I mean, as it stands, the only species that they do not have well, actually, they have direct ties to pretty much every species that we have currently encountered. Humans, Cabal, Elixni, Scorn, Vex.
Sometimes it truly makes me think, how long have we known about the Hive in our Cabal ancestry? If we've named stars after them, and we know their sayings, and we know these gods, how long have they actually truly had an influence on us?
Certainly. It is certainly interesting how influential and destructive the Hive have been over our galaxy. Personal notes from me about
the
this.
Irony isn't.
Oh, go ahead.
Is impeccable.
It is certainly ironic and interesting.
After everything they've done to us, and yet, even before then of what they've did to us, we still keep these Hive words and Hive sayings and still use them in our names.
Well, it's part of your culture now, not theirs. They may be derived from their culture, but now they are your culture.
If Oryx can learn to take, we can learn to take it back.
As it should be. Now, any other mentioning points that I have? I could talk about my personal grievances with the Osmium Dynasty as a whole, but that may be reserved for another time. Other interesting notes about the Hive. Well, for starters, Rolk, the first disciple of the Witness, has an interesting history when it comes to the Worm Gods. That will be discussed further in his own episode. But it's very interesting that the Hive have such the Witness and Rolk, to an extension, have such an interesting influence over the Hive's creation. The witness was the one who spoke through the old white worm to Sathona those many years ago. Rolk was able to effectively influence the Hive, the worm gods, and give them a modicum of power. And as revealed during Savathun's ascension into the light, it was revealed by Ikora Rey herself that the Hive were meant to be chosen by the Traveler. They were meant to be chosen. They were going to be chosen, which makes the Leviathans pleased to go back up and not sink down to the deep and create their doomed fate all the more sad. Had they have gone up, they would have likely been chosen by the light. They would have become enlightened. And had they not listened to some dead white worm familiar, a lot of species could have been saved. The Ammonite, the Ecumene, the Quugu, the Harmony, the Taisha Beth, and the countless others that were eradicated by the Hive could have all been saved had it not been for the Witness's influence. Which goes to show how deep it runs, and specifically the Witness's machinations over our universe.
Even if the Witness has an influence on what happened to them, I will say I wouldn't have too high of a hopes for them if we got to them first.
Probably. But granted,
I'm not saying all.
But granted, the Hive Empire, the Hive started out so long ago. The only two species that I know of that predate the Hive, in terms of their ascension or history, would be the precursors that would eventually make up the Witness, and the Lubrayans, Rolk's species.
Oh, yes.
But besides those two, I don't even think the Cabal were even spacefaring by were even potentially even less evolved enough to become the Cabal when the Hive took power. This was eons ago. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years.
If I look back even into our longest archives, many of our history is gone due to the destruction of Torabottle. I don't even know when we started developing. To be very fair, the oldest history I can ever think of is the legend of Acreus. I don't know when we started off. I don't know how we became what we are.
Because of the Hive.
Evolution finds its ways, but even then, I'm clueless. And that's coming from someone who works in the archives.
Unfortunately, the Hive have a tendency to destroy knowledge, which is funny considering their main god was the god of knowledge, of power and knowledge. And yet, this god was unable to ascertain knowledge in the way that it's supposed to be, a catalog of everything that should have been, instead of just a catalog of the conquests and the annihilation that was done. It's certainly a shame, and I hope and pray to the Traveler that someday the Cabal are able to take back Torabottle, and that the entirety of the Osmium Dynasty and their kin are wiped from existence. Just as they have,
maybe sooner.
Just as they have wiped species from history, except in their own stories, may we wipe out the Hive from existence and only have their records in our stories. Anyways,
I've said it better myself.
Indeed.
Except I hope they live the rest of their lives in the Sea of Screams.
That would be too generous for them anyways. Anyways, I appreciate everybody for tuning in to this newest log. You can listen to this podcast or collection of logs on both YouTube and Spotify under the Destiny Lore Emissary Logs.
And of course, we will be linking our social medias if you want to find us, interact with our content, because obviously we have lives outside of podcasting.
Exactly. If you wish to follow my co-host Salem, she has a TikTok, AddieHArt. I will link that below. If you wish to follow me, I both stream on Kick under Jorio Gaming 00, and you can find my other account under this username, Jorio11 Lorekeeper. Anyways, before we go, do we want to mention the next episode? Do you know what the next episode is?
From... Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, everyone.
No,
My
it's
brain is
okay.
not working today. I'm
No,
so tired.
it's okay. The next episode we will be covering is the opulent fall of Callus, where we will be discussing Callus from the time he was exiled to his eventual defeat on Neptune.
I'm sure you all will have a field day when we mention the Leviathan again.
Oh boy.
I'm sure the young wolf will have some nostalgia.
Indeed, and it will be a nice little history for those who were risen after some of the events that occurred. Anyways, thank you all once again for tuning in. Do you have any final words?
Do not be a stranger. If you want to ask us some questions in the comments section, or just, want to get a little hint on what's going on in the background of what we do, don't be a stranger. We will not bite.
Oh yes, please feel free to ask questions and comments, DMs, whatever. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys may have. Anyways, would you like to...
But we won't be sharing our secrets.
Exactly. No secrets, just take it easy with the questions. Anyways, you have you want to do your outro? Would you like to do your outro? Or do you have something else to say?
I want to say one more thing. As per usual, our scheduling process is we normally record on Sunday or Monday, considering there was a little bit of a scheduling issue yesterday. We will be posting whatever we record Sunday through Tuesday. So you will probably see this today or tomorrow, everyone.
Exactly. That is our upload schedule, so expect episodes between Sunday and Tuesday of each week. Anyways, would you like to do your little outro?
Of course. We are Cabal. We eat the mountains, and we drink the seas, and we will conquer the stars. And I'll see you all on the battlefield. Goodbye.
We will see you Starside, Guardians. Cue the outro.
Cue the outro.